This is Second Wind.
Today, we're speaking with Diane McArter, founder of Furlined. Since 2005, she's built one of the industry's most respected, award-winning production companies. As if that wasn't enough, she co-founded Manifest Works, which creates access to the industry for people impacted by foster care, homelessness, and incarceration. Her focus has always been clear: build a culture where filmmakers and staff feel supported, empowered, and able to do their best work. Diane McArter, welcome to Second Wind.
My goodness, thank you, Carrie, for that lovely introduction. I feel very privileged to have been invited. Thank you. I've not found time to, other than the daily, to integrate podcasts into my life, but I'm inspired by yours. And I think that it's so lovely and conversational. I listened again to the Greg Hahn one, and I just enjoyed it so much. It just feels so real. You know, that's what I loved about it.
Thank you.
So,
That's
you know,
what it's
nicely
about,
done.
right? Keep going.
We'll definitely
Stop.
keep this in. Just launched Nick Law this morning, which I'm very excited
Oh my
about.
God, I've got to see Nick Law.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
you've got to send that to me.
How did you first find your way into commercial filmmaking and production?
I started in an entry-level position, and I had the good fortune to be promoted rather quickly as the company was growing. At the very tender age of 31, I became the president of Ridley Scott and Associates, RSA, in the United States when the company was opening here. And that was really, you know, an incredible privilege and really accelerated my career growth. And I think I used to fib about my age because I was clearly far too young, but I had incredible support around me at the time to guide me and teach me how to run the business. I was recommended to Ridley and Tony by a producer who they trusted, and he was near retirement. They did a marvelous thing. They hired him to ghost for me for the first year, to have my back, to help train me. In spite of the fact that I did miserably on the first interview, I was given a second interview, and I seem to have nailed it.
Now I want to know just
Pretty
how
miserably.
badly it went.
I flew to LA, and dinner was started at 9:00 at night, but that was midnight for me. I'd flown
Wow,
in that
that's a
day. And
tricky
to
one.
be at a dinner is rather intimidating, with Ridley to your left, Tony to your right, and some other friends of theirs, guests, celebrities at the time, and bodyguards behind them. It was a
Oh
rather
my
intimidating
God.
environment.
What were your early influences?
Having the opportunity to live in France as a way to support myself, I was modeling at the time. Yeah, I wasn't interested really in being in front of the camera. I was really interested in what they were seeing, how you know, how they would look at the world and really transform. It was like magic. These were renowned photographers of that era. Jean-Luc Sieff, who was very commonly referenced by Tony Scott, Guy Bourdin, some amazing photographers who were really art photographers. It truly fascinated me how their lens on the world just transformed things. Those photographers and art references really expanded my worldview.
I'm curious about your leadership style, because we talked to Danielle Hawley recently, and she said coming up as a woman and as a creative, she had to have sharp elbows. But then switching into leadership, she was sort of like, I've got to stop yelling at people, right? But you strike me as quite like thoughtful and measured, and maybe it's a Canadian thing, but I'm curious about the
Maybe
production
it's a
world.
Canadian thing.
Well,
Well, you know,
Canadians
as
tend to be nice.
Canadians are
This is
said
so
to
nice.
apologize for everything, including the
that's the-
things they're not responsible
Yeah.
for.
Very early in my career in a TV production department. And there were all these amazing women, but they were so tough. And I was like very afraid of them. And so I'm curious, you know, as a 31-year-old being put in this incredible position of leadership, what was your leadership style then? And has it shifted today, or have you always been someone who was sort of very empathetic, caring? That doesn't make me think of advertising back when I started. It was like
Sure.
more like a zoo or something where people
Yes.
were yelling at each other.
I don't think I had a leadership style then. There was a very accomplished, amazing woman running RSA in the UK when I was appointed to president of RSA USA. She's no longer alive, sadly. Her name was Jo Godman. I was absolutely terrified of Jo. I shook in my boots every time she came to New York, and she was so competent and so direct and assertive and incredibly powerful. I had an enormous amount of respect for her. All my peers were very charismatic males, very powerful men, and women hold power differently than men. I do remember one once referred to me as the Ice Queen. I felt like it was mismatched with who I was at my core, but maybe what I thought I needed to be at that time. The whole notion of women's leadership. If you think about it, little girls around the age of 12 and 13 tend to become somewhat silent. They know how culture and society, they know what the norms are, what's expected of them, the messages that we get culturally and what we're told, and then how we have to show up in a world professionally and how we reconcile those things. And so for me, it's been a very long journey and continues to be one. And I have a real commitment to supporting women in their leadership roles in whatever way I can show up. And when I speak to young women today who are entering their professional careers or have been working for 10 or 20 years, they're struggling with many of the same issues that I was. And that surprises me.
Well, it's kind of shocking, isn't it? I mean,
It
this
is.
this is still going on. You've talked about the hallmarks of a leader, and it's all about the culture that you're creating. And you've talked previously about democratizing leadership. What do you mean by that?
If you think of the culture of a company, it's everyone participates in creating that. You're just creating the container for how that culture can come alive, and every single member of the team, and frankly, all of the other stakeholders, from the directors we work with and work for, our clients, the crew, the freelance teams that we work with, everyone who comes in contact with the company, and particularly the core staff, they're all contributing to what that culture is. And so leadership needs to be cultivated at every level of the organization. I think that we think of leadership and we think the term executive leadership, we think leadership is reserved for those people who are the leaders. But in reality, fostering what good leadership is, which is good communication, integrity, building trust. Imagine the privilege of creating an environment where everyone feels they're on a leadership journey for themselves, and thereby it contributes to the organization.
And what is your approach specifically at Furlined to building teams? How do you go about that?
It certainly begins with the leadership team modeling what we aspire to, which is good leadership qualities. We are very dedicated to working with executive coaches. It's an ongoing process where it's a dedication we've had for years. Our CFO, Mary Quinn, and I have worked together now for, I think, 17 years. And she's so integral to the business. She's so much more than just finance. She's strategy, she's planning, she's an essential part of the operations of the business and just the soul of the company. And I had previously worked with another CFO who was relocating to Australia, and I'm very dependent upon that person in my role. And that was just gut-wrenching to me to lose our former CFO. And so there was a lot at stake in replacing her. Mary had come from the agency side. Early in her career, she was one of the early employees of Chiat Day, responsible for opening their New York office. So she had a vast experience, and here she was coming to work at a production company. And I think she thought we were all crazy.
I mean,
she's
come
like,
on.
You guys are a little too rock and roll for me. Thank goodness we have Mary, because thinking back to those early days, it's become far more rigorous. But Mary, a few months after working together, came to me one day and said, I don't think I can work with you. And I thought to myself, what? The company needed her, I needed her, and I knew that she needed the job. But she had the courage to come forth and explain to me the things that I was doing that were getting in her way. And she said, so I need to share this with you. And she said, I'm willing to give it a try if you are. Now, what an incredible gift for someone to give you, to speak openly and honestly and candidly. And I've told this story. I tell this story to the new staff members all the time. She had a solution, and the solution was to work with an extraordinary gentleman. His name is Dr. Ivan Rosenberg, who she had the privilege of knowing, and some of the agency founders and leaders that she had worked with had collaborated with in the past. And she said, I think if Ivan could come in and do some coaching work and help us find common ground. I had the experience of coaches before, but never at the level of Ivan.
I also think it's very open and brave of you to have accepted it and taken it as a growth opportunity.
I love that you're using the word growth, because it sounds like such a cliche to say values, but we're committed to growth. for everyone's growth, for the directors, for every staff member. Frankly, a lot of people don't make those steps towards growth because it's difficult and it's uncomfortable unless they have to. We continue to collaborate with Ivan Rosenberg and really came to us knowing very little about our industry.
What made you move on from employment into, forging your own path?
It was born out of need. When you've been in a relatively high-level position, there aren't a lot of people that want to offer you jobs because you've done their job. When I had the privilege of working with RSA, the UK was always the mothership. The art of advertising was what we aspired to. We didn't think in America we were creative enough, and we just revered all the work that was coming out of the UK. So when Furlined was about to come into being, I had the good fortune to meet James Studham. And really, it was my eyes turning back to London, looking for the inspiration of what the industry, the hallmarks of all great advertising. And as a result of James Studham, I met Dougal Wilson, who we continue to work with.
Yeah, you still work with him.
Yes. And that's been a marvelous journey to be on and to, be witness to the evolution of an amazing director's career.
Hearing you say that the CFO is the soul of the company is just really beautiful. And it's so interesting that she was the one that brought you to this.
Yeah.
See the value of external coaches.
It would be better for Mary to express this, but I think it's fair to say that she believed in the company. She believed in what we were doing. We have to do that work that makes a difference in directors' careers for agencies and brands, because we really are amplifiers of the ideas that they create. And there's great risk involved in our industry. We have to create a safe space for the directors to operate in. They need people who have their backs, who they trust, who they feel get them and are supporting them. Mary does that for all of us. Decisions that have to be made about allocation of resources and risks that are taken, you really need a steady hand and someone who's also understands the strategy. We often make investments in directors' careers. If we're making a significant financial investment, Mary needs to come from a place of belief that the decisions that are being made are good ones. There is that trust, and I think there's another word for it too, and that's alignment. At every level, to create that space in which the company can operate and thrive.
There was a creative I worked with for a long time called Dave Snyder, who said, process is a safety net that allows creatives to do their best work. Someone like Mary, as you say, is almost like a safety net for the creatives. Kerry, we've talked a lot about fear and how fear and creativity can't exist in the same space. I wasn't expecting to talk about the CFO today, but I'm really glad you brought it up.
Rather than seeing a CFO as just a functionary, of finance and legal. And there are many aspects. Ours is a challenging industry these days. We shoot all over the world. We have productions in Chile, in Prague, in Scotland, Mexico, in
just
Canada.
Never in LA, right? Shoot all over the world.
Unfortunately,
Never in
less
LA.
and less in LA, although I'm very happy to report that we're doing a job this week in LA and another one in December.
Hopefully the storm hasn't thrown a spanner in the works there.
Hopefully we avoid the bad weather. If you think about the complexities of that and how managing all of that happens within a production company behind the scenes, and it has to happen seamlessly. You're dealing with all kinds of different issues and legalities in different countries and labor
expectations,
issues,
culture, agreements.
Yeah. And that's needless to say, our producers, as well as Mary, providing as you said, sort of the safety net for operations so that the work can be done and can be done with a sense of confidence and freedom and not coming from fear.
I'm curious about how you find and nurture, your directing talent, the directors, because you've worked with so many incredible Oscar winners, Emmy winners.
It comes from all different, there's no one way. And
Instagram?
It's yes, Instagram, sometimes Instagram. It's being able to spot a director's voice at no matter what stage their career is at. And so there was a director who I worked with a number of years ago who once said to me, Di, you saw it before I saw it. And I thought that was the greatest compliment I've ever been paid in my career. Directors often yearn to expand the way that people hold them in their minds, wanting to continue to expand their repertoire and how they're seen. there was an opportunity that we had, 16 years ago now, that came out of BBH London when they had Levi's, and they were looking to do transformative work for that brand that had been previously identified with very aspirational talent, gorgeous young people wearing these jeans. And they were looking to do something that was a little more urban and grittier to expand their reach, their target audience, and talk about outside of how people might have held Specca Gordon in their minds. It was anything but. And it was a transformative opportunity to even get a chance to pitch on this. We got their foot in the door by offering them up as writers. And they were able to bring concepts and ideas for developing this campaign, an opportunity which we so love to work higher up the ladder of influence with an agency in a very trusting way, to be creative collaborators, contributing to generating ideas and not just executing on ideas.
Has there been a moment for you where you've needed to reinvent yourself?
When my former business partner and co-founder of Furlined declared that he was, taking on some new endeavors, ultimately amicably a parting of the ways, that was a big turning point for me. And
you founded the company together.
And I would say that for the first time, I had to think about my leadership as a woman and me being enough. And
Was that confronting?
Was it?
Confronting.
Yes. And coming to terms with that took time. That didn't happen immediately. I think it's still a work in progress. I'm still a work in progress.
We're all a work in progress, that's for sure.
Yes, that's the beauty of it all, right? I had a check to write to buy out my business partner. I kept thinking, I got to put my big girl pants on here. When I speak to younger women that, women may struggle with a little more than men. I was speaking to a very dear friend who's a therapist. He works with a lot of men. Their experience is grandiosity.
Okay.
He said, I work with very few women who come from grandiosity. If anything, it's looking to break down grandiosity in men to come to a more connected and integrated way of being. And if anything, to look to build it up in women. Isn't that interesting?
It's fascinating and yet unsurprising. But I'm interested to talk about Manifest Works, which you co-founded.
I'm, forever grateful to Dan, who introduced me to these programs and invited me on weekends to come in and participate in some of the work being done in the juvenile justice system in Los Angeles. And there was an aha moment when we realized, wow, these young people keep coming back. They'd be out for 6 months and then they'd be back in. What they really needed was a chance to support themselves, their families, and to be a contributing part of their communities. They needed a chance. We knew that in the freelance community of crews in commercials and film, television, music videos, that PAs, and very much like myself, working my way up from receptionist to the role that I'm in now, but that PAs hired on a freelance basis have an opportunity to grow their careers. We realized, wow, if we could create something that we could provide support and training for young people who've been disadvantaged and impacted by the juvenile justice system, foster care. 75% or 80% of the kids who come from foster care in LA County end up in the juvenile justice system. So these disadvantaged kids from homelessness, foster care, who've been impacted by incarceration, institutionalization, that we could actually create pathways for them to become PAs and do training. And we literally bootstrapped together 10 years ago, our first cohort of I think we had six young people. I'm so proud of the work the organization has done over the years. And it just fills me with such pride when I walk onto a set in LA and some guy comes up to me and wants to give me a big hug and just runs over and it's like, Di! And wants to tell me about his family and, he got a new apartment and a car.
That's a really interesting message for young people. It doesn't matter where you start. You can fulfill your potential.
Dr. Ivan Rosenberg will say this. Great leadership is being of service. And I think actually when I was listening to Greg Hahn in the podcast that he did with you, he talked a little bit about that, the responsibility of being of service to the staff and to your clients. I came to that receptionist role that I was only in for a matter of weeks. I was lucky to get promoted because someone quit and I got to be the assistant to the executive producer very quickly. It came from, one could say, work ethic, but it really was being of service. It was about going above and beyond. The other thing that it really takes for a young person is, as much as possible, look to what is their passion and what is their purpose, and discovering that. And I don't think all young people know that from the beginning when they're starting out in their careers.
Sure.
Misalignment, it can be very bad for the culture of a company if someone is misaligned in the role that they're in. An understanding of one's purpose and one's passion. A very, very dear friend who also sadly is no longer with us, Sir Ken Robinson. He wrote a book called The Element. He talks about that convergence of passion and purpose, where you're just in a really wonderful state where, the work doesn't feel hard. It's a joy because you're in your element, as he would say.
A lot of it comes back to empathy too, Diane. We've spent the last hour, and most of the time you've told us about how great other people are. And I think that speaks a lot about your character and your leadership style. The servant leadership element is really interesting there. Going back to your 3 weeks as a receptionist, you were there to help and to be there for other people. And I think that is a really wonderful trait. And, you clearly continued to do that throughout your career. So,
well, that's nice of you to say. I think that, the attributes of female leadership tend to be relational as opposed to just transactional. Women tend to strive for consensus, which isn't always the most efficient leadership style, by the way, but building teams, striving for consensus, coming from a horizontal versus a vertical style of leadership. There's been so much written about all of that. But I think the thing that distinguishes many of the, successful women, they're relational. It's not that they're not transactional as well. And it's not that men can't be relational, but
it's also not a zero-sum game, right? I think a lot of people come up, especially in America, thinking you win or you lose, right? And I think it's a really important, lesson in that helping other people to win means you can also win, right? And everybody can win.
Yeah.
It's not like one person gets it and all the others don't. I think, what you've talked about has really reminded me of the importance of like helping others as a way to succeed, which is sort of goes against the grain a little bit.
And we talked a lot about
grain in America, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I've
no Americans on this call, so we can slag
no
them.
Americans on this call.
Well, and I've had the privilege.
All the Americans who are listening.
Definitely. And I have had the privilege of working with a lot of Brits and Canadians and continue to, and a lot of marvelous women.
When people look back on your work and the environment you've built and the career you've had, what do you hope they remember?
Somebody once asked, what would you put on your gravestone? How I'd like to be remembered is the following. She never learned to sing or dance, but she did make me laugh once or twice.
That's beautiful and also humble. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you,
This has
Diane.
been an absolute pleasure. And Gully, it's lovely to meet you. And Carrie, I hope to see you in person one day soon.
I really hope. Next time I'm in LA.